Hello and welcome to the Dissidents Podcast, brought to you by the Institute for Liberal Values. This is where we talk about how we can strive for a world in which freedom and reason are at the forefront of all human society. In this week's podcast, Elizabeth Spivak and Mike Burke discuss symbolic protest and the internal struggles inherent in making decisions about whether or not to make a stand. Okay, hello everybody. So as usual, before we start, please do write comments, subscribe, share, talk about it. I usually respond to people in the comments personally if you write something. I certainly will respond to you if you name me personally, but I probably will anyway. Especially, I love it. I love responding to people who call me a Nazi. That's like particularly good fun. So if you feel like doing that, like please do that by all means.
Mike, you should let me know if anyone calls me a Nazi because I'm not monitoring these things as closely.
Oh, okay. I will do. I don't think you've been called one yet.
Okay.
But like I've got all of the classic Nazi signs. I've got blonde hair, blue eyes, and I support Israel.
Yeah.
And
apparently that's enough.
That's enough. Yeah.
Okay.
He likes Jews.
Yeah.
Yeah, apparently that's enough. So anyway, please do interact with us, because we are trying to grow this and we're going to be putting more effort into that in the new year. But it would really help if you could do your bit, and we'd like to hear what you think as well. Okay, so that out of the way, today we are talking about symbolic protest, and we're drawing from an article by Thomas E. Hill Jr., Symbolic Protest and Calculated Silence.
So I just wanted to mention, so I sent this article to you because I was on the Heterodox Academy, community chat or whatever. And somebody wrote in and said, I'm in this miserable position and I don't know whether I should stay and try to change things from within. Should I be looking for another job? What should I do? And somebody wrote in and recommended this article, and it's from 1979. And so it's not a research article. So everything, I mean, it's not like it's expired because, it's a philosophy article, which I know is much more your thing than and we certainly done stuff on what epistemic kind of crises and that kind of stuff. So it's related to things that we've talked about before. But I was just so interested how contemporary this feels, even after so many years. I mean, did you feel that way?
I didn't actually even think to check the date. So, as far as I was concerned, it was written in 2010.
Yeah.
Usually when I read an article, I just assume it's written in 2010. I don't bother to check the date. Which is, especially for philosophy articles, that's kind of fine, right? Because you can read stuff by Nietzsche and from the 19th century that is absolutely applicable to the situation today. That hasn't aged in a way. There's lots of timeless stuff. Dostoevsky, if you're a fiction reader, has a lot of insights that are very, arguably even more applicable to the present than it was the time in which he was writing. He foresaw quite a lot. So no, I didn't think this was in any way dated at all, really.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah.
So this person is, this Hill is talking about your reasons for protesting. So he's kind of getting into sort of the moral reasons for protesting, which I thought was, was a little creepy for me to read. Did you, I don't know. We're always talking about how these things sort of reflect ourselves a little bit.
It wasn't creepy for me to read. I mean, and
I'm like, ooh, how did you know that I've wondered if that was my motivation?
It should be creepy for me to read, but it's just not, because I see so much nonsense. I see so many people protesting, and I know that they don't have the faintest clue what they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I saw like a YouTube video recently of like, some idiot college students in America saying, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." You can probably find it if you look for it. There are probably millions of videos in which
I was
people
gonna
do
say
exactly
I don't
this.
have to look for it. It's like right outside my back door, probably. Yeah.
Yeah, and there was some guy just going up to these people and going, "Okay, which river?"
Right.
And they didn't know, right? They did no
Yeah.
idea. Which sea? You should at least know it's the Mediterranean, right? I mean, that's not hard. So, and they couldn't even tell you what the sea was, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
like, you know, I saw another video in London in which some British woman was "Free Palestine! Free Palestine!" And just like completely, and somebody went up to her and said, "Do you know what happened on October the 7th?" She didn't even know.
Yeah.
So he had no idea. Like, "Oh, did something happen? Well, I'm just here to protest,"
But
and
but this article is really about our own moral protestations when we
mm,
believe when we so protest, when is protest commendable despite the risks, and why should we protest? Why is it appropriate? Why, when can it be admirable? But and then also when, as you just point out, when it can it be sort of foolish and self-righteous? And you're talking about the self-righteous piece, but both sides are, and I don't know,
well,
I mean, I
I'm not
can be pretty.
necessarily talking. The point, I self-righteous isn't maybe. I mean, these people are being self-righteous. That's true. But what I would suggest is something even colder than that, and this is something that the article takes on, right? It talks about like a consequentialist approach, right? So,
Right.
let's quickly just define what consequentialism is. So, if you want to think of whether you should do something, like, I don't know, give Elizabeth an apple or something like that, one way of thinking of why you should or you should not do it would be to think, well, try to imagine, well, what would be the consequences of me giving Elizabeth the apple? And if the consequences would be good, then okay, I mean, Elizabeth will like me, so therefore I will give Elizabeth the apple, right? So that's kind of thinking about things in a selfish consequentialist way, right? So you could think in a consequentialist way, and this is something the article touches on as well. If I protest at this meeting, then people will listen to me and they may change their minds, which may change the future outcome of policy, let's say. So, for example, if I am at Harvard and I point out that Jewish students are feeling scared because they're being threatened in their room, and there needs to be some disciplinary measures taken according to Harvard policy, which I presume is not being implemented at the moment, and who knows, then that I might have a chance. I might be able to sway people's opinions. So that would be, when a protest would be consequential, right? But another way of looking at it from a kind of consequentialist point of view would be, I know all of that might be true. I may have the ability to sway somebody's opinion, but I may also bring suspicion upon myself for not having the kind of opinions that other people in the room have. Therefore, the consequences of my action might possibly be good in terms of those Jewish students, but I'm not going to do it, even though I know that is true, because the consequences for me would be negative. Do you see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of like how we would see, a protest from a
Well, and then there's
consequentialist view.
also
The symbolic
utility.
faction as well.
Then
Right,
there's
okay, so
also,
the
yeah,
utilitarian,
utilitarian.
so utilitarian would be James, our friend James. So our friend James is always thinking about the good of humanity, rather than the good of the individual or the good of groups. So you would, from a utilitarian point of view, you would tend to think that, presuming that you can make a positive change, presuming the positive change is possible, because if it's not possible, then there's no justification to do anything, right? But presuming that you can make a positive change, then you would take the action that would be good, not for the individual or the group, but for the whole of society, right? So I would think, look, I am at risk, but that's okay, because this sectarianism that's erupting on campus isn't just dangerous to Jews, although it may be dangerous to Jews predominantly at the present. Beneath it is also a whole kind of anti-Western ideology that has been used to justify terrorist attacks, or in the case of the adjacent kind of critical social justice ideology, has been used to not necessarily justify terrorist attacks, but to explain them away as the inevitable consequence of Western, in their view, imperialism or colonialism. Colonialism is probably a more vogue term for them, although imperialism is often used too. And so therefore, while the terrorist attack is in and of itself horrible, it is not predominantly the fault of the terrorists, but rather the colonialism or the imperialism. And that if we want to end these sorts of terror attacks, then we do not crack down on the people who have been the victims of the colonialism, but rather on the colonialism and the imperialism itself, which is the kind of dominant way of thinking that is, I don't know, in my view, has completely corrupted Western academia.
So
and then there's a deontological approach as well, of course, which is another.
Yes, you should.
So a deontological approach really draws on the philosophy of Immanuel Kant. I'll give you a classic version, and then I'll try and give you an updated version as well for deontology. So this is when I'm explaining this to my students, this is the example I give. So I put a silly question on the board and I say, why does Mike not punch students? Right? And I'll draw it out and say, okay, you've not done your homework. Bang! I just smack you in the face. Why don't I do that? Well, what is it that I do that? And then they're kind of like nonplussed by that kind of question, because the question is so bizarre. And I'm like, no, I know it sounds like a stupid question, and superficially it is, but there's actually something deeper beneath this, because this draws out what deontology is, right? And so I'll ask them, and then they'll say, well, you'll get arrested. Yeah. Okay, that's one reason not to do it. Well, you'll lose your job. Okay, it's another reason not to do it. Well, we won't like you. Okay, great. So the students naturally go to a consequentialist point of view, right? They naturally adopt a consequentialist morality. So I said, okay, let's imagine that I have some sort of time machine, right? So I can punch you in the face, and I can rewind time, and then everything's going to be okay. Would I punch you in the face? And then they're kind of like, they're kind of stuck. I'm like, Jesus Christ, do you think that lowly of me? You think that I would really punch you in the face? And so that's the point. So once you remove the consequences from the negative action, if it's still something that you would not do, then there has to be something other than a cold consideration of the consequences in terms of your reasoning not to do it. So for Kant, this came from an innate sense of right and wrong that was bestowed upon us by God. And Kant uses the classic trolley car problem. Do you know that one?
Oh, yes.
Like I've got a better one that I do with my students. I think a better example. So like what I do is I pick up a something like a mobile phone, and I go, okay, this mobile phone is now a phaser, okay, and or a gun or whatever, and a terrorist has just run into the room, okay, and the terrorist says, whatever you do, you will walk out of this room okay. Right? So unless you try and attack me, I'll kill you. But apart from that, if you do exactly what I say, you have a choice, you do exactly what I say, and whatever choice you make, you're fine. Okay? So I then ask usually a female student who's a bit of a shy and a timid one, because it really helps with the kind of psychodrama. So I get the timid female student to come up to the front of the class, and I put another phone, because I've got one pointed at the student, so he or she can't do anything, right? I go, here's a gun. Now, either you kill Sammy right now, or I will kill the whole class. Now, if you kill Sammy, Sammy dies, and the whole class and you get to go out of the room. But if you don't kill Sammy, then only you and Sammy get to go out of the room. So can you actually pull the trigger or press the stun button or whatever, on the phaser? Can you actually do it? So from a consequentialist point of view, you would know, it would be obvious what you should do, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, sorry, Sammy, I don't want to kill you. You seem like a lovely person and this is
Right.
horrible, but I have to save all of these lives. If you're in my position, you
Right.
would understand. And Sammy, on a logical level, would understand, right? And so would the other people in the room. But could you actually pull the trigger? And what I find is that most people can't.
Right. Most people say they can't. Yeah. Yeah.
So consequentialism and deontology usually give you the same answer of what is right and wrong. Okay, that's also something that's worth stressing, right? But not always. And
Right.
the other classic example, the place where this is really a problem right now, is with self-driving cars.
Mm-hmm.
So this problem is actually being considered in like Toyota and Nissan
Yes.
and all of these places, because basically the technology for self-driving cars is already here.
Right. And it can make the decision to kill one to save others without, it doesn't have a conscience. So the car can make can make the, depending on how you think about it, right.
Right. Yeah. But then here's the point. So this is something I've explored with my students as well. So this is very anecdotal, by the way, and I feel confident that what they're saying is reflective of what most people would say, but I haven't tested it, so I'm just going to flag that up, right? I haven't done this in a proper study, but again, I think I think I'm fairly confident that if I were to do this, this would be reflected. So when I ask my students, okay, so a self-driving car, if you are in a self-driving car, even a consequentialist self-driving car, right? So even a car that will sacrifice you to save a greater number of people. So the chances of you dying in a car crash are much, much less than you driving your own car, even though it is a consequentialist one. Would you buy one? And most of them say no. Most of them say no. If you change it and you make it like a deontological self-driving car, right? And you say, well, okay, the car will sacrifice other people but save you.
Right.
Then they'll buy one.
Right. Or sacrifice some unknown in order to save more unknowns.
Right.
Yes.
But then the interesting thing is then you compare, okay, well, how about the consequentialist self-driving car, which is much safer? You're much less likely to die in a self-driving consequentialist car than you are if you're driving on your own, or a car that you're driving. And almost all of them, I mean, literally, I've taught this for years, and usually there isn't one person who would choose a consequentialist self-driving car over a car that they themselves drive, even though they know that they are far more likely to die in a car that they themselves drive. So and they know that, they understand that, and so there's something that they feel they naturally want to have control over it.
Yes.
Some students won't even go for a deontological car that will save them over other people, because they feel that they have to have control over something.
Yeah, and that's somehow wrong also. There's this little,
Well, I don't want to say that it's, I don't want to say that any of these decisions are wrong, because if I was to say that, then I would be kind of like implying that there is a universal set of rights and wrongs, and I'm not sure that that's true.
I guess I don't mean wrong. I meant wrong sort of like there's this this moral, there's an ickiness to all of these. And so there's something, there's like this moral ickiness. Yeah.
But I mean, that's like one of the points. So like, if I'm raising these problems in a class, like I'm teaching a class on this stuff at university, then Like one of the things, and one of the points I really want to hammer home is like, because the students' like reaction is that this is really difficult. I can't give you an answer. This is hard. It's like, yeah, that's the point, right? You're not. The point is not that you give me an answer. The point is that you appreciate that it's hard, right? The point is that the greatest minds in the world, across the generations, have gone over these problems, and there is no clarity. There is no lack of ickiness. There is no definite answer, and it's that kind of moral ambiguity and uncertainty that you need to appreciate.
Oh, but my Mr. Burke, I have a question, Professor Burke.
Yes.
So what will the right answer be on a multiple choice test? Because that's all I really care about.
I don't see what.
No,
okay,
I know. I know you don't. You know, I mean, that's one of the issues that that we run across a lot. But you don't understand. Like, I just shut up and give me the answer. Just shut up. You know. So, and I know you don't have as much trouble with that as we do.
In Japan, I don't.
Yeah.
So it's but that's part of growing up. And some people never grow up. Some people think that there is always a clear right and wrong.
Well, they also think they're already fully baked, and I don't think they want to be, real. They don't want to be challenged too much. But anyway, so
that's Western students, by the way. Japanese students don't think they're fully baked, which is great.
Yes. So so these sort of like, do what your conscience tells you, do the courageous thing. Maybe, I mean, the author is just sort of the author here is just sort of like trying to set those aside and, say that, from a utilitarian point of view, which you just described, a very small chance to stop a great harm would still make the risk useful, right? Yeah. And then, so, even, like you said, and this person saying, like even the hardest heart might soften, we might make some difference. So some victim or pain and suffering might be avoided. But when I read this, he also, he comes back, he circles back around and says, you might want to stay within this, somewhat corrupt institution in order to work from, within for reform. But when the benefits of this sort of, are so slim, he's saying, maybe it's not worth it. And not only that, but maybe even resigning in protest isn't worth it. And I'm looking at my own situation, and I know that, you're at a different institution now, but I do know that you were kind of going through the same thing. It's like, it seems like, you're much more positive than I am, but I don't think there's any hope that I'm making that me being there, other than just simply reminding them whenever I can. I don't think I'm making any difference within my own institution. I don't think my effectiveness is making it worthwhile to stay. I don't think I'm reforming from within. So I'm not quietly cooperating, which, the author also argues sometimes is appropriate, right? Because you have, as you said, you have your own self to consider, right? Like and that's legitimate. That's legitimate. If they give the example, well, even if you're doing something horrible, they give examples of the Holocaust. They would kill you and just get somebody else to do it. So why exactly would you protest?
Well, first of all, how so this is one of the innate problems of the paper, right? And it applies to your situation as well. After having gone through what you've been through, you are going to be paranoid, right? That's a natural adjustment to the kind of environment within which you now exist, which means that you are going to think a lot of people are out to get you, because a lot of people are out to get you,
Yeah,
But some of the people that you
maybe
think
not,
might,
but
but not all
right,
of them,
some of them, right,
and
right,
maybe potentially not even most of them, right?
potentially.
But that's just, the classic example I gave is living in Japan, I tend to avoid other foreigners because I know that a significant proportion of them are going to be woke, even though I also know that most foreigners aren't woke, right? And so, the guy at my kid's daycare, he avoided me and I avoided him because we both thought we might be woke, and we both hate wokeness, right? So you are going to, a significant portion of people are after you, and you know that, and that's obvious because of what happened to you. A lot of them probably are cowards who know better, but but most of them probably aren't out to get you. But it almost doesn't matter because enough of them are to warrant your paranoid, conservative kind of keeping people out behavior, and it's justified. It's appropriate.
So this paper
But
made me kind of sad
but
because I
but
was
hold
like,
on.
why am I
But
trying?
but 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 hold on, and this is the
Okay.
problem with this is the problem. So your position is justified, right? But you're justified in being wrong because you have to be wrong, right? You have to accept a degree of error in order to be safe, right?
Right.
But you don't know. There's no real way of you knowing whether you're making a change or not. And there is no way of the person in the hypothetical person in the paper knowing whether or not the sacrifice he is trying to make or the protest that he or she is trying to make will result in that small change or not. So you're stuck in a position of ambiguity. You don't know. So in your case, we know why you feel the way that you do, but can you really say that you're not making a difference? You see, I would argue that the prevailing social circumstances which would enable us to know whether it was likely that your protestation had made a difference or not has not yet come to light.
Mm.
Do you see what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
other things on the outside need to happen. The public consciousness shift needs to really, really, really come to the fore before action is taken against institutions like yours, but also including Harvard.
Well, yeah, and I think so. Here's the thing, and I know I'm, I'm just gonna say outright, we're not going to necessarily disagree that much, but we're probably going to disagree more than you might think. But I would say that um, on the part that we probably won't disagree on is, I don't really feel sorry I don't feel badly for her last name's Gay, the
No,
Harvard president.
no
At the,
sympathy
I
at all.
don't, here's the thing. I don't believe that she deserves to be canceled. I don't believe that she deserves to be fired. I don't believe that she should have to step down. I do believe that she spoke the truth. Words are not violence.
It's true.
And so and words or chants or whatever typically do not consist of harassment. Now, if you follow somebody into the class, you keep screaming at them, that kind of thing, maybe. They were speaking the truth. When they said context matters, context does matter. Just like the way that, the language that, like you said, the reported speech that was in the survey, the context matters. It was in a survey. You had an orientation to research. You signed up for a research platform. You picked a study. You read a consent form. You answered about 100 questions. You knew you were in a research study. You knew that language was not, being used against you. So context matters. So where, in my opinion, the reason that I am not sympathetic towards, the presidents is not because I think that they said anything wrong.
Because they're
It's
hypocrites.
not because they were correct in what they were saying. The reason that I'm not sympathetic is because they made decisions that were completely antithetical to what they were saying over the last many years. So, like Carol Hoover, who got canceled for saying that there were only two at Harvard, for saying that there were two genders, and we should refer to pregnant women, not pregnant persons or whatever, because were she ended up having to leave Harvard because and this president was involved in that situation. She moved to try to deny someone, revoke someone's tenure because that person believed that Jeffrey Epstein, I think it was Jeffrey Epstein, but anyway, a vile character deserved, a proper defense. And she wanted to revoke that person's tenure. There have been other examples where the current Harvard president took action against people for their speech, which in context, which she says matters, she should not have acted against them if she believes what she said. So I believe what she said was, accurate, and she didn't deserve blowback specifically, or they didn't deserve blowback specifically for what they said. But it is not the policy, it's not the procedure that they have been using, with regard to other issues.
Okay, so I have three things to say about that.
Okay.
Okay, so the first I'm just going to refer to as class, like having class.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know what the rules of Harvard or any of these universities, MIT or whatever, I Penn State, I don't know what the rules are. So
no, it's University of Pennsylvania, just to be clear. We don't want to use the wrong, because those are two different institutions.
I'm not an American. I'm not an American. I had assumed that they were the same institution.
Yes.
Okay, so the University of Pennsylvania, MIT, and Harvard, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I have no idea what the rules of them or any other institution are. And if you are a president on a stand, you may not know what they are. And it may be that the rules are ambiguous. And so that context matters if you're calling for the genocide of Jews. I don't know. I don't know none of that. But, from a point of class, the first response should be, I just want to make it abundantly clear that I think that anybody who calls for the genocide of the Jews is utterly reprehensible. That should have been the first thing that came out of their mouths. Now, does that make them evil or wrong? That's a mistake, right? And that doesn't condemn them morally.
I don't think they had to say that. I think in fact, I don't think they should have said that, because I don't think it was their place to state. I think that they could have said, just to be clear, I am personally not neutral. I'm personally not neutral on this topic. I'm personally not neutral on murder, on rape, on kidnapping. That I don't think they had to say anything about whether it was, Palestinian or Jew or any of that. I don't think they had to say any of that.
You see, look, I'll get on to why I think they have to say stuff like this, because I wouldn't give them the benefit of the doubt that I would give other people, and I have very good reason not to. Well, you've given me the good reason not to give them the benefit of the doubt because of how they've acted in the past, right? You gave me three examples, I think, of the way they've acted. Look, so I mean, in terms of class, they should have said something to that effect. And look, if I had have asked any of them, is calling for the genocide of black people against your terms of bullying?
Interestingly, somebody did. I didn't know this, but somebody did ask a very similar question.
Mm-hmm.
It was not exactly that question. I wish that that question had been asked immediately prior to the one that was asked about, calling for the genocide of Jews.
It should have been prior.
Yes, exactly. It was a slightly different question. It was, they just obfuscated and, and that kind of thing. But here's the thing is like, I think a completely legitimate answer is I am not here to give you my personal opinion on these things, because my personal opinion is not relevant in my role as president of the university, nor is it relevant here on the congressional floor. Now, again,
But it is, though.
no,
Sadly.
it's not. It's not.
No.
Because no, it's not. And your role is not to, as a person who's interpreting the law, or the, a code of conduct or whatever, is to insert yourself, because that's exactly what they have been doing.
Right.
And so what they're doing, there's a difference between, they have all made a series of choices that are antithetical to what their testimony was.
Correct.
But their testimony is how they should behave and how they should have behaved in the past.
Yes, but you're talking about how things ought to be, right? I agree with you on how things ought to be, but I'm talking about things how they are. That is their role, because they and people like them have made that their role, right? That is the moral standard that they are now operating under. That is the system within which they live.
It doesn't make not make it the correct moral standard.
No, it doesn't. But they have chosen to live by the sword, metaphorically speaking. They've chosen. They have chosen this path. But it
was the wrong path.
Yes,
and I don't really care. I do not care. I don't care how they get back to the right path. I do not care how they get back to the right path. I don't want them to get back
to the right path. I want them gone. They have chosen the path of the sword, not just for them,
so when
but
I
for
say
other people.
When I say they, well, exactly. When I say they, I mean other people. I do not care how we get back to the right path.
No, I'm gonna do a James. Okay, James is our friend, and James, if you're listening, you'll probably say I'm not doing justice to him, so sorry in advance. James.
Probably not, yeah.
Probably not, because no one can ever do justice to James.
No.
But I think, channeling my inner James, James is a barrister, by the way, so he has a very legal mind. I think what James would probably say would be, look, in the abstract sense, the ought is correct. However, these people have corrupted these institutions, and not only corrupted them to gain favor, they have used it to persecute dishonestly other people, and therefore throw the fucking book at them.
Well, yes, but we still have to.
See, I would go further than James. James would just say, okay, we have to move things to the correct way, and we will throw these people. He would probably say, we will throw these people in prison for a very long time.
Yes.
And I wouldn't be against that. He would probably say, if the law allows for it, and if it doesn't, we need to make the law allow for it, right? But we should throw these people in prison for a very, very long time, and we should never let them anywhere near any institution of power ever again. And I go even further than James. I would say, in order for us to restore the institutions to where they need to be, where they used to be, this horrible little drama needs to play itself out from a moral point of view. They need to learn their moral lesson, right? Like, think about this as kind of like one of Aesop's fables, right? They need to go through it. Okay, you've created this moral system in which, in order to benefit you at the expense of innocence, now you're the victim. I'm not going to fucking intercede in it. No.
Yeah.
Now, I might say that this isn't how it ought to be, but you've made this, and no way am I going to save you by applying my values to you, because you do not deserve that. This is exactly what you deserve. And I'm going to, not only am I going to not intercede, I'm actually going to laugh at you and enjoy it, because you need to suffer. Not just for the sake of you. You need to suffer. You need to be made an example of for the whole of society. Look, you live. That's the moral point of view. Okay, this is where I go even beyond James. That's what I think is morally correct. I think it is morally correct to laugh at them for their suffering, what they have done to other people. Right? We're not talking about innocence here. Right? We're talking about, look, Gay, who plagiarized like entire sections of a PhD thesis and other articles as well, and has been revealed to have done that, and Harvard are kind of bending their own standards to pretend that she hasn't done that, knowing full well that she has, right? She is a dishonest individual. That's obvious. She is a fundamentally dishonest individual. And she dishonestly has persecuted other individuals, and needs to suffer badly and good.
Okay.
But that's one more thing. So I've said in terms of class what I think you should do, and I've said in terms of morality what I think is right and what I think is wrong. But the third thing I want to add is a tactical thing, and this is something that we've observed all along. The woke will eventually eat their own, in the same way that the Soviets ate their own, right? So, you looked at the Soviet Union. I mean, we're talking about Ken in this, and, you read Solzhenitsyn and you find out once they'd killed all the rich people, then, they had to find ways of persecuting other people, because they always needed somebody to blame as to why they hadn't yet reached their wonderful Soviet utopia. Yeah, and they couldn't blame themselves, obviously, even though the reason was themselves. They had to find other people to blame. So they're always on the lookout for oppressors or Western agents, and so they found people who were not oppressors and Western agents and sent them to freeze to death in some gulag in Siberia. But it wasn't just the people. The same kind of thing happened on at the upper levels, right? In the top echelons of the Soviet party. So you find these photographs of the Soviets party members one year, and then the next year half of them are gone, because it was happening at every level. This kind of, apart from at the very top, unless you're Stalin or somebody like that, but it was happening. These kind of purges were constantly going on. Same thing is happening in China right now, incidentally. So with these woke types, they constantly need somebody to blame. Like, they need to find racists, and there aren't any racists in the university, or if there are, they're completely silent about it, because and that's why your example of that, you're not a racist. Absolutely preposterous to suggest that you're a racist, and you said nothing that could ever be even vaguely reasonably interpreted as being racist either. It's completely stupid, right? Obviously, and anyone who was involved in that needs to be fucking ashamed of themselves.
Yes.
And if you want to take me on in a debate, by the way, I'm happy to. 10 of you versus me. Like, bring it on. And it'll be easy for me, by the way, even if you're smarter than me, because I'm right. Anyway, so there is a shortage of racists, right? So they are purging themselves. They are going to purge themselves. I don't want to interrupt that from a tactical point of view. I want them done. Like, it would make no sense for me to interrupt the cancellation of gay. Like, please cancel her. Like, just do it.
Right.
Like allow all of you people, all of you ugly, teeming, these horrible, unsympathetic, uncharitable people, just eat her alive. Do it. Like, I want these people gone. And if the woke can help me get rid of them, then let's just have at it. There's no point in trying to stop this ideology from eating itself alive, from a tactical point of view. So those are the three things I have to say about that. They don't deserve any sympathy.
Yes. So while I agree, and feel similarly on many levels, here's where my a different side of me kicks in, which is that we, and this is related to the article that we read, we are also, we're saying, you know what, like you said, eat each other, like go for it, you have to resign, you have to be canceled, because we're morally right. And that's, I mean, we talk about this all the time, like, how exactly are we better if we participate in, or if we condone or endorse or whatever,
or participate and just watch?
So what I would really, really like is something different, because when somebody gets canceled, they mostly just sort of like disappear into, the ether, right? I mean, they go underground, you don't have a voice anymore. And like we can talk about that in a minute. So what I would really like is not for her to be just fired, but for a moral reckoning that is more public. So for the hypocrisy for a reconciliation of the hypocrisy. So and this is, again, the way the questioning went, unfortunately, even though it's obvious to you and to me, I don't think that and especially the way that the news has reported it, they haven't put these questions to get the Congress persons who questioned them didn't put this together in an orderly fashion, and it hasn't been reported in an orderly fashion. But to have to have a reconciliation that will move things forward, it's got to go beyond just canceling someone, and for one moral side to cancel another moral side, and then another moral side to cancel another moral side.
Yeah.
There has to be an actual, like, look, the way that I testified in front of Congress is representative of the way things should be. And look, I'm willing to give somebody a way out. I really am. If it can move things forward, and if we can say, if I can say, look, you were caught up, as I have thought about with some of the people in my university. You know what? I don't think these people meant to harm me. They were doing the consequentialist, like helping themselves, right? Kind of thing, like virtue signaling and all that kind of stuff. And that's what Gay was doing. That's what a lot of these people were doing. And to say, okay, look, it turns out that I'm really willing to virtue signal over here, and I just realized that I'm not over here. That's what I really want, because I think that's what's good. Because let me ask you this, Mike, do you really think that if Gay is forced out, or the University of Pennsylvania woman, Liz McGill, who was forced out, okay, do you really believe that the next president is going to be a president who has never participated in the cancellation of someone, who actually, has a different viewpoint about DEI? No, they're going to get it's just going to be another person who has exactly the same views, who has done and has to have done the same thing in order to get promoted to that position. They have to have endorsed the same kinds of thoughts, behaviors, and this ideology. They have to have. Otherwise, they won't get the job.
No, I agree. So Gay got the job not in spite of her views, but because of them.
But because of
them,
the next person will too. So a different kind of reckoning is what
Look. So you're kind of asking two questions here, right? You're asking, one, do I think Gay deserves to go? Yes. You're actually asking three questions. One, does Gay deserve to go? Yes. Two, will that have any massive ramifications on Harvard as an institution? Probably no.
Or any other institution.
And three, what would be needed for the necessary steps in order to restore Harvard to what it is supposed to be, right? What is needed. I see getting rid of her as an example of the public consciousness reasserting itself. So no, it is.
I don't
think about So you think about
I see them as it's scapegoating. It's not taking what she should do. If she had any moral courage, again, if she had any moral courage, but if she had any moral courage, she should stand up and say, you know what, I'm a hypocrite. I'm a hypocrite, and we have participated in this hypocrisy for the last however many years, and it took this in order for me and for us, whoever whoever the us is, whether it's a small group of people around her or whatever, to say it took this to wake me up to the hypocrisy, and that would be a courageous act.
Yeah. Do you think she's going to do that? Harvard
well, not only do I not think
They've closed ranks
but
around her, right? They're saying they're trying to change their standards
yeah.
of plagiarism.
Well, that's exactly what I'm saying. Even if she resigns, she's gonna be replaced with the same thing, and that's one of the things that this article, again, that's what they mentioned, right? If you're doing a job and you're doing maybe a job that maybe you're like sort of kind of changing things from within, but you can't really do it very much, and are you really better off resigning? And look, the thing is, most of these people, and you've said this many times before too, they believe that they were doing that they were doing the right thing, right?
Not her though.
Not it. Well, a lot of them are just, they're just doing it for their own personal reasons.
Right.
But there are people who genuinely believe in what they did, that they were advancing causes that mattered, and that, they believed in, postmodern whatever applied to colonialism and blah blah.
Okay, yeah.
There
Post-colonial
are
theory.
people who believe in, I mean, the person, the critical race theory, is that Crenshaw, that you're often talking about. I mean, this was the way that it started was, it was never meant to be what it has become.
No.
And so, for us to say that now we have the right answer is also, it's not what I stand for.
We are. Well, hold on. We are fundamentally different to them, right? In the sense that we have. No, hold on.
None of us are fundamentally different from one another.
No, we are. Or at least I am, and I think, and I'm confident that you are too. Like on an epistemic level, we have humility, right? We constantly say, "I don't know. I'm not sure. I have doubts."
But we have to, but I guess that's what I'm saying. Is we have to constantly work to maintain that humility.
Sure, and we maintain it imperfectly, which is itself an example of us having humility, right? They don't. They don't have any humility. Like we go through papers of them arguing the data that they found shows the exact opposite of what it actually obviously says, right?
Yes.
Like we've seen that before. Even when they're doing good work, they can't. They don't have any doubts, right? Even when their work obviously shows their whole ideology to be skew with, they still don't have any doubts. They're completely consumed by certainty, and that's what makes them evil.
Yes, and I agree with you. I also think that when those presidents tried to communicate that they weren't certain, they were also lambasted for that. And those were the answers that they gave were the right answers all along. It's just not the answers that they gave.
I'm not sure that they were the right answers. In the UK, if you were to call for the genocide, like here we're going to find a legitimate cultural difference between the Americans and the Brits, right? Because we are a little bit different. I would argue, by the way, that the Americans and the Brits are actually the same culture fundamentally, and I think that the independence of Britain and America is over now. They're basically the same country again. They're kind of grown back together, and culturally we're growing back together as well because of the internet. There was a period of independence in the Revolutionary Wars and afterwards, but that's like gone. And the capital of the British Empire is now Washington, unfortunately, largely Washington DC. But there are some legitimate cultural differences. So we don't have freedom. We have freedom of speech in the UK and a high standard relative to the rest of the world, but we don't have it to the same degree that you have it. And I would actually argue for further curtailments of freedom of speech in the US as well. And in the UK, to call for the genocide of the Jews would be illegal. That would be a crime, because it would be an incitement to violence. Now, I think, I'm not sure, and if you're an American lawyer, and James, if you're listening, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure, again, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm pretty sure that under British law, that calling for the genocide of Jewish people would be a criminal offence. I'm pretty sure, I'm 99.99999% sure that you would be arrested for that in the UK and probably thrown in prison. And I believe that that is correct, because that is an incitement to violence. And so, in America, if you say it depends upon the context, and I have no idea whether that's true or not regarding their harassment policies, and I have no idea whether or not saying that is okay under American law, may or may not be.
It is, yeah.
It should be illegal then. So in which case
Yeah.
the answer shouldn't be there is no context. If you're calling for the genocide of the Jews, I'm sorry, and that that ought to be against the law.
Yeah,
You disagree?
it's not. No, it's not.
In the
And
UK, absolutely is, and I believe that that's proper.
and
You disagree?
And the reason that I don't think it should be against the law is because, again, it's fine for me to say I don't like that speech, and I think that that's bad speech, but I don't want to be the decider of what's bad speech, and I sure as shit don't want somebody else to be the decider of what's bad speech. So I don't think that
Right, but
should be. Yeah.
When you start to talk about dangers of the dangers of speech, and I agree in principle with what you're saying, and I agree with you probably 99% of the time. So if somebody says something like "I hate black people," it's a ridiculous thing. Why would you say such a thing? But yeah, I did. Okay, fine. That you should pay a social cost for that as opposed to a legal cost. However, within the United Kingdom, calling for the genocide of Jews would be an incitement to violence. It would be distinctly separate from saying something vile and anti-Semitic like, I don't know, I believe that the Jews are secretly controlling all of the world's major institutions, or
Well,
the
I don't think
elders of
it's
the Protocol of Zion
yeah.
is true.
Yeah.
Those are horrible things to say, but I don't think they should be illegal.
Yeah.
But specifically saying, I think I am arguing for the genocide of Jewish people, I believe in the genocide of Jewish people, that crosses a line.
Yeah, I don't think it.
And let me be perfectly clear.
I don't want it said, but that doesn't mean that I think it should be.
I get where you're coming from, but this is a legitimate difference between you and I. So let me be even clearer. The hordes of people who are roaming around the streets of London right now, screaming things like that and supporting Hamas, I don't believe that they belong in the United Kingdom, and I would deport every single last one of them. Passport holders, I can't. And if they're dual citizenship, I'd strip them of their British citizenship immediately and deport them. Anyone who is not a British subject should be deported immediately. And those who are British subjects and are carrying on doing this should, as I think James would probably agree, thrown into prison pretty quickly and kept there for a very long time. That kind of, you cannot have a liberal society in which people are allowed. This goes back to Popper's paradox of tolerance. Have we talked about this? I think we have, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like in a liberal society, you want to be as tolerant as possible. And you and I would and have indeed extended that tolerance to people who would say deeply objectionable things. Like, for example, deeply vile and anti-Semitic things, which we would push back against, and we would say that's violent. We would try and make them pay a social cost for that. But again, we don't believe that that's a legal thing, right? Popper would agree with us, right? But then he would say, what about when there are people who are expressing really intolerant views, like arguing for the genocide of Jews? Popper would say on that point, well, okay, we shouldn't respond with violence and intolerance immediately because maybe they're not being very consequential, right? Maybe it's just some idiot down the pub and his words are going to stand no chance of having any effect whatsoever. Everyone just rolls their eyes and says, what's an idiot? Okay, and in that sense, fine, we can let that go, and maybe we should let that go as liberals in a liberal society. But where Popper is very clear is he says, when people are saying these things and there is a fairly decent chance of there being intolerant behavior of persecution happening as a consequence of them, then we need to be completely intolerant right up until the point of physical violence. And I agree. And I think that the speech that is happening in calling for the genocide of Jews or celebrating Hamas is intolerant, not just intolerant in and of itself. Again, you could be saying all these things and be just some idiot down the pub and fine, we'll just ignore you. But people are actually being persecuted. Synagogues are being firebombed. Right? We're at the point where this speech is not only vile, it's actually having real consequences.
Yeah, but again, I.
But you get the distinction. I'm not saying that being a vile
No,
anti-Semite should be illegal.
no,
I don't believe that.
I
It's when
think
it's calling for violence.
no, I think your distinction is your own, and I don't think that's appropriate. I don't think that's an appropriate way to make decisions. I don't think I don't think that it's not whether I disagree with
Oh,
your
I
morality.
get it. I completely get it.
It's that that it's inappropriate to make laws based on something that again I'm going to use Jane's, but like the fashionable sort of culture at the time. And this is how we got to where we are. We got to where we are because a group of people said that language is harmful, it's hurtful, it's violence.
Yep.
And that language is so harmful that you should be essentially put in social prison. And so to argue now that because we think we're on the correct side.
No, there's a difference. Go on, carry on. I interrupt and you interrupt me. This is what we do. Carry on.
It's like, it's just like, I just think that is to assume a moral high ground that I don't believe that we have. And that's.
I do believe that we have this, and I believe as an Englishman specifically, and the reason why I make the Englishman distinction is because I come from a culture in which that kind of speech has been illegal for a very long time. Right, and that came before wokeism had ever reared its ugly head, and it did not cause problems then. Look, where I've always and consistently drawn a line, and I would argue the same thing for the benefit of Muslims, and I would argue the same thing, of course, for the benefit of black people and, of course, white people too, that if you are calling for the genocide of a certain group of people, that is an incitement to violence. Like, how can genocide be anything other than violence? It's like asking to murder somebody. It's calling for the murder of somebody.
Well, I mean, I can tell you that someone can, say that they want me dead, and
No, but that's not the same. Somebody saying that they want you dead is not the same as saying, I wish somebody should murder Elizabeth Spivak. It's not the same, right? Saying I wish that
somebody can say that. They can say that.
I wish somebody would kill Elizabeth Spivak.
They could say that, yes. And I could call the police and they could say, well, unless somebody actually, shows up with a weapon, sorry. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying,
I get where you're coming from. I perfectly get where you're coming from. You're not saying that we shouldn't criticize the speech. You're not saying that the speech is any less vile. So you would completely agree with me that calling for the genocide of the Jews is an absolutely vile thing to say, and anybody who said that should pay a very stiff social cost indeed. Right? What you're saying is that, and probably you're not even saying that they don't deserve to go to prison for it either.
I'm not saying that they should.
No, because there's a difference, right? I think morally, and we should probably tease this one out. There's a difference between saying somebody says something awful that warrants a penalty, a moral penalty as stiff as going to prison, but that I don't trust anybody in being the adjudicator of that, and so I don't trust that power being abused, right? So like when somebody says something awful, like I think, for example, if there was say something like they thought that all blacks were subhuman, right? And they were to continue going around saying that and persuade people that that was true, right? So they were, causing harm. Now, I would agree that moral transgression deserves a punishment as severe as prison.
Well, I don't agree with that.
What my worry would be is that I don't trust the state not
Right.
to abuse that power with other people. And that's kind of like the whole kind of
Yeah.
moral creep that has happened with wokeism, right? Like
Right.
because, you know,
Right.
that power has been abused. But I think when you're calling for genocide, for me,
No, I mean, look, you have a line, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't have a line, right?
and
Like,
nor that it's not consistent, because
it's your personal, it's your personal line. Don't cross that line. If you cross that line, I mean,
and it's
it's your prerogative.
and you too. But what you're doing is you're arguing from a very kind of American, very
Well,
American
I
idea,
don't
and
know
that's
that
fine too. That's
yeah, I
fine
don't
too.
know that it's an American look. I actually, I mean, it may be partly American point of view, but I also think it is a very personal, it is a humbling, as we try to be somewhat humble in this. But, and it's hard because we might have very strong opinions, but we have seen up close and personal, both of us, what the moral high ground can be used for ill. And I don't particularly want to claim the moral high ground, and I don't want anyone else to either. And to use it with that, set that severity, that you're talking about. So one of the things that, I was looking at this article. So it's, to feel moral indignation is perhaps a good thing, but it remains to be seen why it is commendable to express it in protest, which is not expected to be effective. One might think of symbolic protest as a minimum form of retribution. It's often thought that those who are guilty of deliberate and gross injustice deserve to suffer, or at least that they ought not to prosper unbothered while they cause others to suffer. When a person cannot, when a person cannot stop an injustice, he is usually in a poor position to punish the perpetrators in any direct way. However, by protesting their deeds, which is basically what we're doing, in our podcast, right? He may come to some degree to disturb their comfort. Most people like to have a good opinion of others, and even tyrants are apt to want at least submissive acceptance. So by protesting, a person gives notice that his approval is withheld, and that although he must live with the injustice, he does not accept it. And I think that's what's deserving of, someone who says something, so we're not, we're not we're not taking this retribution as far as in my opinion, I don't think we should take it as far as James, and that we should, we should talk back to these people. We should do what we're doing in terms of the woke ideology, in terms of the, the hypocrisy, and calling people out on this. So, I don't know. I would not take it as far again, as you do. I'm worried that no one is to be trusted with that.
No, but I'm not sure that there is. I mean, again, I do draw the line at genocide, but I also am worried about what is coming next now, because
and it's, in this article they even say that the non-protesters share the guilt of the wrongdoer. And that's another issue, right? The cowards, the silent, the self-censoring people, I read that, and it's like the silence of the non-protester shares the guilt of the wrongdoer. And I'm like,
but that doesn't even go far enough to what I suspect is coming. The elites of society, the woke elites of society, of course, not all of whom are woke, the majority of whom are the silent majority, right? The silent majority realizes this is a problem but won't do anything about it.
Yeah.
Are in for a whole world of hurt. They have stepped way out of what is the public consciousness. They have tried to impose themselves upon the public consciousness, not just in terms of university and media, but also in entertainment. We know how much the public consciousness is recoiling against this because we can see what's happening to Disney, and not just Disney, Bud Light and all these kinds of things. The backlash that has already started to unfold is going to be horrific. Perhaps overseen by somebody like Donald Trump. And I suspect that when it comes, we will be seen not only as, we will be treated as if not only we were part of the silent majority, but we were part of the problem. We were part of the woke problem. And that's already happened to me. I already get accused of being woke quite frequently.
And a Nazi.
And a Nazi, both. Because the average man on the street, he feels that all of this critical social justice stuff, he wouldn't be able to say critical social justice, right? Neither would Donald Trump. Donald Trump would not be able to explain the basic precepts of why this is a problem from an ideological or a philosophical or a psychological point of view. He wouldn't be able to articulate any of that. He would be able to name it and say that it's bad and point to a few examples of people who have been unfairly cancelled and say, we have to do something about that, right? The average person, the average moral consciousness doesn't know what this is. And so they are going to kind of identify it. They already are identifying anything that calls itself liberal as being woke, when in fact wokeism is the antithesis to liberalism.
Right.
And so we can't, it would be completely silly of us to think that the backlash that is coming would spare us. We will be seen as being part of the problem, even though we were the first to suffer and speak out against it and try and fight back against it. You know, we're going to be persecuted by that lot too, I think. In fact, arguably already have been.
Right.
Because we will fail the purity check. Helen paid a massive price, right? They went for her because she failed the purity check. She said, look, you know, I'm not going to call myself a conservative, and she wouldn't mean a conservative like I call myself a conservative, which is a philosophical conservative, not somebody who's the modern incarnation of what right wing means, which means, you know, anti-gay and all that kind of stuff. None of that. But she wouldn't go full on board with the whole kind of conspiracy theories that are coming out, that this is being, you know, that things like the United Nations trying to turn kids trans, which is just laughable.
Right.
Because she wouldn't get on board with that kind of thinking. She failed the purity check and she suffered. She was cancelled by people who had previously idolized her. So we should not expect to be spared.
So one of the things in this article was they talked about the Hill talked about the clean hands rationale. So, you know, the sort of like, and I see a lot of this. I think,
I feel
that. It's like,
no.
Yeah. So, you know, one interpretation is that the protester is trying to dissociate themselves, not, you know, to avoid responsibility of the, getting, well, again, I guess getting dirty, I guess. So, but I also see that, so like we're trying to say, look, clean hands, right?
But I also, as well, right?
Yeah.
People do that to us.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like, and then people are doing that, to us also, like not, even if they silently agree with us, they're like, whoa, not, hands off. Matter. Yeah.
So no, I've felt this for a very long time. And I really like this part of the paper, like, because I'd always felt, like, in a sense, I felt clean, because in a sense I was confident I was right. I could argue my position. I could back it up with evidence. People couldn't debate me on what I was saying. They pick the smartest of them and let me at them. They're not going to win. Like, as I said before, with your case, like, get 10 of them, the smartest, give you 4 weeks to prepare. I'll wander in on a hangover and put you to the sword quite easily. And that sounds like a boast, but actually it's not. It's because I'm right. And then and I'm quite confident
Well, and
of
as
that.
you've said, most of these people haven't
I
read.
haven't read anything.
I mean, I think I told you that,
They don't
there was
read.
a meeting, an off-campus meeting,
Yeah.
and I show up at this meeting with, essentially the agenda that they set forth for a little grant that they got. I show up at the meeting, I mean, it's not my agenda, it was theirs. They're like, none of them had read it. A couple people prepared it out of the 8 or so. And then I asked them if they'd read that stupid racial justice task force report thing. No,
No.
nobody's read it. Nobody's read it. Has anybody read, the latest contract negotiations, has anybody read the latest strategic plan that doesn't mention knowledge or learning or anything? All it mentions is graduation rates and making people feel good about themselves. No, nobody's read it. So, you point this out all the time, that the people who, seem to be taking the strongest moral stance often have no, you know,
So
they have nothing to stand on.
this is another thing that James would say. James would say, right, okay, fine, that then they can only ever be dishonest. They are dishonest. It's dishonest.
But they're also arguing that from the clean hands, their
Okay,
own clean hands.
yeah, let's unpack this a bit more. So I feel like the clean hands thing, and there are people who agree with me on everything that I'm saying, and one of them is even a fan of mine. He listens to everything I do here. He reads all of my stuff, and yet he still does the clean hands thing with me when it comes to other people. Anyway, so, but no, I feel this. I feel, and I've always said this. I feel dirty.
Yes.
Like I have that physical sensation that I feel that there is, in a sense, that I'm right, that I'm seeing things in the correct way. But by being right, there is something fundamentally wrong with me as a human being.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't think that that's true, but
No,
I
but that
feel
is,
it.
yeah.
It's a
Yes,
sensation.
it is. Yes. And it is part of, so shame has this element of disgust in
Yeah.
it. And disgust, of course, it has to do with like contamination, and there is a hands off, kind of whoa, clean hands kind of thing with someone who has been shamed or may be interpreted as, feeling shame or something like that. There is this, sort of uh emotional content that's related to an evolutionary survival thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? So something that is disgusting, something that is contaminated might actually cause us death. And in terms of ostracism, it would cause us a social death, right? Ostracism has been called a social death. And so once we feel that contamination because we are ostracized. And so, we talked about this, little more self-disclosure here. We talked about this in a meeting on Wednesday, right? Where there had been like a week or so where like the Institute for Liberal Values people weren't really communicating. And every single one of us to a person was like, I felt rejected. It's like, because we feel so vulnerable, just as you said, like
Yeah. Yeah.
that vulnerability of knowing that we're sort of contaminated in a way.
Yeah. I mean, you know how bad it was for me at my last workplace? Like,
Yeah.
people would, it's really weird. Like, the people who hated me made me a leader, like elected me as a leader. It was very,
Yeah.
very, very, very strange. Odd. But anyway,
Yeah.
so the people would, like, I think I can be quite charming sometimes. People used to say that about me before I was cancelled, and now I struggle to see that in myself, even though I think it's probably true. Students still say that about me. So there's that. And they're Japanese, they're not contaminated with this horrible ideology. So anyway, yeah, I used to say to people at work, look, you seem really nice, and I hope you have a great time here. And if you want any advice on your courses, then or what to do or anything like that, and I'm more than happy to help you. But like, try not to get close to me. It's not for my sake. Like, I'm happy to be your friend and the rest of it, but like, you really don't
Right.
want to, because you will be contaminated and people will go after
Yeah.
you. And it happened to
Yeah.
people who did get close to me.
Yeah.
Like people just went after
Yeah.
them. They didn't do anything. People who wouldn't go after me because I'm ferocious would go after them instead.
So I was actually like caught off guard. The person who's in the office next to me is actually sort of like silently friendly towards me. Okay. So made it very clear I cannot stand up for you. I'm not going to stand up for you, but I believe in you, kind of thing.
Right.
Okay. So I accidentally entered that person's office, and somebody else came by and saw me in that person's office. And I felt compelled to apologize to that person and said, I won't go into your office again. And so that's an example right
Yeah.
there, because and it wasn't that person demanded an apology of
No.
me. I felt that I needed to. So, um,
But that's where we are. And just like
yeah.
this, like as genuine liberals, this is where we are. This is what society is like right now.
So I wanted to, this is at the end, like the end of the paper. I think there might be another paragraph, but I'm not sure. I don't think so. So this is very appropriate for cancel culture. So the author says, without attempting to give an analysis of self-righteousness, so he's not going to go into the psychology of it, let's review some of the objectionable traits and attitudes we might expect to find in the most extreme case of self-righteous person. A partial list includes the following: concern for the appearance of virtue more than the substance. That's definitely we saw that in the congressional hearings also, right? This is one of the things that drives people to the hypocrisy. So the concern for appearances would drive someone to, like someone like Gay, to cancel someone because that appears virtuous, at the time when you're rising to become a president. And then you do something different in the congressional hearings because that's what appears to be virtuous. So I'm not giving her credit for being more virtuous on the stand, to be clear. I'm just saying that I agreed with what most of them said on the stand. Mm-hmm. That's how things should be. A strong desire to be acknowledged as superior to others in whatever they, in whatever is thought to reflect the worth of a person. A strong desire to be superior. So not just to be seen as superior, but to actually be superior in such matters. An unrealistic, inflated idea of the excellence of one's own character, particularly as nurtured with self-deception, so you don't have to really be that kind of person. You just have to, look like it. A distorted sense of moral values with excessive pride and rigid performance of minor duties and little appreciation for love and the need to alleviate misery. The tendency to search for faults in others. We will, as you pointed out, we'll look under every rock and we will find some racism. We will find it. And an unforgiving and intolerant attitude towards the wrongdoing of others. So this, sort of, again, we've talked about this before. It's like, we want to give people room to change, to change their minds, to change, to see this in a different light. A desire to dissociate from the corruption, the clean hands thing, that is so great, rather than have a compromising part in one relatively minor wrong, one would choose to let 100 more serious wrongs be done by others. So that's sort of where the paper ends. And I think that is, again, written in 1979, but
just wonderful.
Pretty,
just wonderful, just absolutely wonderful. We should stress that it is a philosophy paper and not a psychology one, right? So he kind of has
exactly.
He kind of almost one. Putting my half, though I do know fuck all about psychology relative to you, which is a lot more than certain people who think they can diagnose people. But anyway,
I know like nothing, basically. Yes. And I actually, as I've confessed to you, it's a struggle for me to read it. It's like because of the way the sentences are constructed and the, whatever.
Okay.
Anyway.
So, but I wanted to kind of like point out some objections. Like, as a philosopher, I'm happy for him to say things like that, but he doesn't know what he doesn't know, and you don't have any evidence, like any empirical evidence for backing up any of those points that you just concluded your paper with, right? It seems to flow in the abstract. and maybe it does flow in reality, and maybe it's more likely than not that it flows in reality. It certainly makes sense, right? It's certainly an appealing idea. But putting my psychological-ish hat on,
Yes, good for you.
I'm going to try.
Yes.
You would need to test for all of those things. You need to define them
Yeah,
and then test for all of
absolutely.
them and see if
Yes.
that they actually, and some of them may and some of them may not actually turn out. What I would say is that it kind of ties in with what we found, although again it wasn't a strong finding, but it was a finding that the kind of person that is attracted to this ideology are people who are narcissists, Machiavellian scheming narcissists, and that's kind of seems to
Yeah, we covered a couple of papers
Yeah.
that found a link, right? That were not just, philosophical or whatever. They did find some links.
right.
At the same time, we also talked about, the problems with the measures, and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. But there was one of those studies was a multi-study experimental approach, and certainly there was some evidence there. As you know, I tend to shy away from the personality perspective because, again, I want really to be more charitable towards people. And I think one of the problems with saying, oh, you have a blah, blah, blah personality is that feels like something that you can't change. People do not change their personalities. And so I prefer, for my own personal mental health, to think of this more like attitudes, more like thoughts, and even maybe temporary convictions instead of a trait or a temperament. So that's just that, and it's one of the reasons why I'm always pushing back on that. I think that's partly for my own mental health.
No, I'm going to elaborate on what you just said by drawing upon you, what I remember you saying, and then I'm going to kind of add my own spin on it. So just because you score highly in narcissism or psychopathy or anything like that doesn't make you a bad person. In actual fact, those traits, when channeled properly, can be used for good,
Yes,
people
we need all types.
Right. So people who score
Yeah.
high in psychopathy tend to be great soldiers and firemen and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And, if you are high in narcissism and you think you're smarter than everybody, sometimes you might be right. Maybe you are.
Or sometimes we just need somebody to take the charge, kind of in a Machiavellian or narcissistic kind of way.
Machiavellianism is kind of me, unfortunately. I tend to construct schemes and plans and stuff, and hopefully for a good thing. So you can have all of these things and they can be absolutely positive.
Right.
They don't have to be negative. But what it strikes me is that the critical social justice framework does pull these kinds of people in, and it does put the negative manifestation. So all of these traits can manifest in positive ways, and we've given examples, but they can also manifest in negative ways, such as the examples we've given in this text. And I think that the ideology allows those kind of psychological traits and rewards those kind of psychological traits for playing out in the negative sense. And that's what I think the link is. It's not to condemn the people.
Right. And because we all have those traits.
Quite.
Right. We all have those.
Yes.
And we all respond to different kinds of, if you just think about advertising, there's a reason why certain advertisements work, more, for certain people or certain ages or whatever, or, when cultures. You think about, cultures. Yeah. So, and so I guess that's what I prefer to think about, is that this is sort of it's an advertising campaign that gone amok,
Great.
That's
a great metaphor. That's exactly what it is. It's an advertising campaign that maybe appeals to a certain sort of person who is inherently no less evil than another sort of person, but has certain traits. and it has brought the worst of those certain traits out.
A little bit of a vulnerability, yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that you might not construct an alternative ideological advertising campaign that might tie
It's just, but this is what was available,
Right.
and the pandemic made it worse.
Right. In a way that you could
Yeah.
say, fascism was another sort of ideological marketing campaign that targeted a completely different set of traits, so more kind of what would be traditionally masculine, kind of strongman kind of traits that, again, can be equally used to do good, and kind of brought them out. And made them, pathologized them in a way, made them a kind of a civilizational pathology, as opposed to the traits themselves being inherently pathological.
Right.
Good. That's a really interesting point to end it on. So thank you very much for listening. Please, again, like, share, leave comments, and discuss this. We've raised quite a few interesting ideas, and I think this was a brilliant article. It will be in the notes at the end, I think. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Okay. All right, I just need